The temptation after a celebrity dies is to demand access to every private detail. But Dolly herself spent decades protecting the privacy of people she loved. She respected Carl Dean's desire to stay out of the spotlight. She protected aspects of her family life, and she defended Judy against speculation. It would therefore be fitting if Judy's grief remained private too. The public does not automatically have a right to every memory. Sometimes the most respectful response is to allow silence to remain silence. Still, there is one thing we can say with confidence. Judy's friendship with Dolly mattered. Dolly told us it mattered. She repeatedly spoke about Judy. She defended their friendship. She included Judy in stories from her life. And as recently as June 2026, Dolly publicly celebrated their decades-long connection. That is stronger evidence than any rumor. It is also more beautiful, because the real story isn't whether the rumors were true. They weren't, according to Dolly's own repeated statements. The real story is that two girls from Tennessee grew up together and remained connected for more than 60 years, while one of them became an international icon. That is extraordinary enough. There is no need to manufacture scandal. There is no need to invent secret revelations. There is no need to create a dramatic final confession. The truth is already powerful. Dolly loved Judy as a friend. She valued her loyalty. She trusted her. And she carried that friendship with her through an extraordinary life. Dolly's final months also make the story more poignant. In 2026, she had been trying to manage health problems while continuing to think about the future. Reports before her death describe her as still focused on projects and ideas even while dealing with medical treatment. Her eventual death was attributed by her representatives to a brief battle with cancer. That means the June tribute to Judy came during a period when Dolly's own life was already changing. She had lost Carl. She was dealing with her own health. She was thinking about her legacy, and she still took a moment to celebrate her oldest friend. Maybe Dolly understood something that many people don't appreciate until it is too late. When life becomes shorter, the oldest relationships become clearer. The people who were there at the beginning become more precious. The memories of childhood become more important. The people who knew you before you had anything become irreplaceable. Dolly had achieved almost everything an entertainer could possibly achieve. Awards, hits, movies, businesses, theme parks, books, philanthropy, worldwide recognition. But none of those accomplishments could give her what Judy gave her. History, a shared childhood, a person who remembered where she came from, a person who could see Dolly without needing anything from her. That is a different kind of wealth, and it may be the kind that matters most. Dolly's death has also forced people to look again at the enormous scale of her life. She wasn't simply a singer. She was a songwriter who created music that crossed generations. She became an actress. She built businesses. She created a major philanthropic legacy through the Imagination Library. She helped make Dollywood into a major attraction. She supported medical research and numerous charitable causes. She had an influence that extended far beyond the music industry. But every giant public legacy is built by a human being, and every human being needs people. Dolly had her family. She had Carl. She had countless professional relationships. She had friends across the entertainment world. And she had Judy. The difference is that Judy knew Dolly before mythology existed. That is why her place in the story cannot be replaced. When people talk about Dolly now, they will naturally focus on the obvious things. They will talk about Jolene. They will talk about 9 to 5. They will talk about I Will Always Love You. They will talk about her movies. They will talk about Dollywood. They will talk about the Imagination Library. They will talk about her enormous personality. They will talk about the way she transformed poverty into ambition and ambition into achievement. They will talk about her generosity. They will talk about her faith. They will talk about Carl. And eventually, they will talk about Judy, because Judy represents something different. She represents the private history behind the public legend. She is part of the story that existed before the world was watching. And that may be why people are so interested in what Judy might say now. Not because she owes the public a statement. She doesn't. But because everyone wants to hear one last piece of Dolly's story from someone who was there at the beginning. If Judy eventually chooses to speak publicly, Her memories could offer another perspective on the woman the world thought it knew. But until then, the responsible story is not to put imaginary words in Judy's mouth. It is to listen to the words Dolly herself left behind. Dolly repeatedly described Judy as her best friend. She celebrated their decades together. She rejected rumors that their friendship was romantic. She spoke about Judy with affection. And shortly before Dolly's death, she publicly celebrated Judy once again. Those facts tell us more than a fabricated final confession ever could. There's also something deeply fitting about Judy remaining outside the spotlight. Dolly was the star. Judy was the person standing beside the star. For decades, that was their arrangement. Dolly walked onto the stage. Judy remained close by. Dolly faced the cameras. Judy protected the private world. Dolly became a household name. Judy remained known primarily to those who knew Dolly. Perhaps that was exactly what Dolly valued. Not another celebrity. Not another person trying to compete for attention. Just someone who remembered her. Someone who had been there when the dreams were still dreams. Someone who had watched those dreams become reality. And someone who could still see the girl inside the icon. That is the real emotional story behind Dolly Parton and Judy Ogle. It isn't a scandal. It isn't a secret romance. It isn't an invented final confession. It is friendship. Their friendship continued as Dolly's career expanded. Dolly became associated with Porter Wagoner, and her career accelerated dramatically. She eventually became a solo superstar. She wrote songs that became standards. She entered Hollywood. She built businesses. She created Dollywood. She developed philanthropic programs that would eventually put books into the hands of millions of children. Through all of it, Judy remained part of her life. She wasn't merely a person Dolly occasionally called. She was described as a trusted companion, an aide who could be around Dolly during the exhausting practical realities of celebrity life. That is an important distinction. Fame creates an enormous amount of noise. Someone like Dolly might walk into a room and immediately become the center of attention. But someone who had known her for decades could help make the room feel normal again. That is perhaps what Judy represented. Normality, history, home, Tennessee. Before the world knew Dolly Parton as Dolly Parton, she was simply Dolly. And Judy remembered that girl. There's another reason their friendship has remained so fascinating. Dolly's public personality was enormous. She was funny. She was colorful. She was confident. She knew exactly how to command attention. She could walk into a room and immediately become the most memorable person there. But Dolly herself acknowledged that there was another side of her, a quieter side. In a Vogue interview, she discussed the difference between being publicly on and the quieter version of herself that existed in private. She specifically mentioned her husband Carl Dean and her best friend Judy as people with whom she could simply be quiet and comfortable. That may be one of the most revealing descriptions of Judy's importance. Because sometimes the person closest to you isn't the person who makes you laugh the loudest. Sometimes it is the person with whom you don't have to perform at all. Dolly spent her career performing. She performed on stage. She performed in films. She performed in television studios. She performed in interviews. She performed for millions. But friendship is where performance can disappear. And Judy appears to have been part of that private space. There were adventures, disagreements, separations, reunions, and countless memories. Their relationship wasn't some perfect Hollywood friendship without conflict. It was a real friendship. That means there were moments when the two women disagreed. There were periods when their lives pulled them in different directions. There were times when Dolly's career demanded more from her. There were times when Judy had her own life and responsibilities. And there were periods when the closeness of the friendship reportedly created tension in other relationships. But that is exactly why the friendship is worth examining. It survived real life. A friendship that lasts 60-plus years is not sustained by never having problems. It survives because the people involved keep finding reasons to return to each other. That appears to have been Dolly and Judy. There was another chapter in their story that became famous because it demonstrated just how adventurous they could be. Dolly and Judy traveled together, including trips to New York during the early years of Dolly's career. Two women from Tennessee entering a huge city. The experience was unforgettable. Dolly later told stories about their adventures with a humor that became one of her trademarks. The point wasn't simply what happened. The point was how the two of them experienced it together. One woman could turn an embarrassing situation into a joke. The other could laugh at the absurdity of it. And decades later, Dolly could still tell the story. That is what lifelong friends do. They collect stories. Not necessarily glamorous stories. Not necessarily important stories. Sometimes the best memories are the ridiculous ones. The moments that would never appear in a career biography. The inside jokes that make no sense to anyone else. The embarrassing mistakes that become funny years later. The ordinary days that become precious only after time has passed. For Dolly, Judy was connected to thousands of those memories. And now, those memories belong to the history of one of America's most beloved entertainers. But Judy's importance became even clearer as Dolly's career became more demanding. A superstar's life can be strangely lonely. Millions of people may recognize your face, while very few people know what you are like when the cameras are gone. Dolly once described Judy as someone who could help her with practical things, as well as emotional ones. She could be an assistant, a companion, a trusted presence, a person who could help keep life moving when Dolly's schedule became overwhelming. That is a role that doesn't appear on a record sleeve. It doesn't show up in a box office report. It doesn't win a Grammy, but it can be essential. And perhaps that is why Dolly's tribute to Judy in June 2026 matters so much. By then, Dolly was 80. She had already lived more than 6 decades of public life. She had lost her husband, Carl Dean, in March 2025 after nearly 6 decades of marriage. She had been dealing with health problems. She had postponed major professional plans. And yet she still made time to publicly recognize an old friend. That says something. Dolly had spent her life surrounded by people, but she knew the difference between being surrounded by people and being known by someone. Judy knew her. She knew the woman behind the voice. She knew the woman behind the makeup. She knew the woman behind the jokes. She knew the woman who came from a family of 12 children. She knew the girl who had grown up with very little and dreamed of becoming a star. And she knew the woman who eventually became that star. That kind of witness is rare. It is also why Judy's silence after Dolly's death has generated so much curiosity.